Are you eating dessert first? And what's dessert have to do with discipline? I saw a bumper sticker that read, "Life is too short, eat dessert first." What do we mean by dessert? Well, there's plenty of desserts in the world. Distractions, right? Netflix, Instagram, Hulu, Facebook, the newest and greatest sitcom. In today's world, it's easy to be distracted. It's easy to eat dessert first. So, how do we stop eating dessert and get to work? With me, it started with discipline. Discipline equals freedom. And today, we're going to talk about how I instituted some discipline into my life and I created freedom, financial security for my family. Discipline's a habit you could form, a habit in which you do what you need to do when you need to do it, whether you feel like it or not. It's like any other habit. The more you practice it, the more time and energy you give it, the stronger it becomes. You ever so slowly start to make the transition from down here in the denominator to up here in the numerator. You start operating from the top. So as we go through the steps I use to develop my discipline and be promoted, I want you to keep something in mind about forming habits. Forming a habit, a bad habit, is really easy to do, but it results in being unfulfilled. Whereas forming a good habit, that takes time, that takes energy, that takes perseverance. Yet the results of that good habit pay lifelong dividends. Whenever I start to veer off my journey, I think about that right there, and it brings me back. So if discipline's a habit, and habits can be formed, then how does the habit of discipline get formed? It gets formed by our behaviors. Our habits are just those behaviors that stick, those behaviors that we do consistently. Einstein once said, "We can't solve the problems we created with the same thinking. We can't solve our problems with the same thinking that we use to create the problems with." So, if we desire something more in life, we have to do something different. I first heard it said like this: to become someone that you've never been before, you must do something you've never done before. So, simply put, you must do things that the average person refuses to do. For example, when I was studying for promotion, about 50% of the firemen applied for the test. About half actually studied the books, and only about 20% passed the written test. So how is it that all those guys want the promotion, but only 20% pass? Because that 20% actually had the discipline to do the thing. They studied, they read, they practiced, they sought out help. They listened to those that went before them. When I was a fireman, I spent every free moment studying. I became obsessed. I stopped eating dessert, i.e., I stopped watching TV. I stopped and I read instead. I used every available minute of my day. My wife would drive us everywhere so that I could study, and when I had to drive, she would quiz me. We used to joke that she'd pass the test before I did. I sought out the experts, those guys that were already bosses, and I asked them what they did. How did they study? What did they study? How long did they study? When we were drilling or in a building on a call, I would ask them questions. I would go back and I would look at the equipment. I would touch it, feel it, and hold it, and make it visceral. I created triggers for myself to make my discipline even stronger. Every time I sat in the house watch, I would trigger studying habits. Every time I looked at a building, I would compare it to something I'd read. Every time I veered off track, I would go back to, I have to pay the price now up front. I can watch TV, or I can go out drinking with the boys, i.e., that dessert, or I can do something different. I can achieve something big. And all of that work paid off. My discipline over 20 years ago paid huge dividends that are still being paid today. To write the book Millionaire Next Door, the authors interviewed and surveyed over 10,000 millionaires, asking them why they were able to achieve millionaire status when most people around them couldn't. 85% of the responses read something to the effect of, I was willing to work harder. I was willing to put the time in. I was willing to do the things. These millionaires didn't believe they had a better education or more intelligence, just that they were willing to work harder. So what's working harder really look like? It looks like taking small actions, small steps. Look, small steps on a consistent basis so that you can reach the pinnacle of your destination. The National Study of Millionaires, a survey conducted by Dave Ramsey, found 74% of millennials and 52% of baby boomers believe that millionaires inherited their money. Dave dug a little deeper and surveyed 10,000 millionaires himself, and he found that 79% of them never received any inheritance. And of those that did, only 3% received an inheritance that would make them a millionaire. So the vast majority out there believe that millionaires inherited their fortunes, and in reality, it's just 3%. Here's another interesting fact about inheritance. We've already established that 21% of millionaires inherited some money. Not necessarily money that turned them into millionaires, but they did receive an inheritance, 21%. So if 21% of millionaires did inherit money, how much of the rest of the population, those individuals that didn't have millionaire status, how much of those had an inheritance? And the Federal Reserve looked into that. And the Federal Reserve tells us that the people who aren't millionaires, 21% of them inherited money. It's the same number. So it's not the inheritance. 21% of millionaires inherited some amount of money, but so did the general population. So the key isn't the inheritance, but what you do with it. When asked, millionaires contributed their financial success not to their businesses, not to their W-2 job, but to being disciplined and consistent. So here are 4 steps I took to be more disciplined when I was in the fire department and studying for promotion to lieutenant. These are 4 things that I did that led me to being promoted. And now, when I'm really looking to achieve new discipline and new endeavors, this is the framework that I use. Because the framework, I created it 20 years ago. And back then, I didn't even realize I was creating it. It's not until I started going down the rabbit hole of mindset that I realized what I did 20 years ago. And these are the 4 things that really propel me to having good discipline. The first is creating a vision. So when I was in the fire department, I had a vision of becoming a lieutenant. I knew where I was going. I had that vision. And I would visualize it in my mind. I would actually go on calls, and with the information that was gathered, the lieutenant would have to make a decision. He would make that decision. And I would try and make the decision before he did, so that I would be able to compare my decision against his and see where I was off. And then I would go and I would I would actually talk to him about it. That's part of the visualization of it. I would, in creating that vision, I would actually feel like I was in that position. I would ask the lieutenant if I could do paperwork. The lieutenant would let me do some paperwork so that I could feel like I was the lieutenant. And in doing that, when I actually did become a lieutenant, it was easier to slide into that. when I actually had to study, I would be more apt to study, even though it was some of the stuff I was reading, 15,000 pages, some of it would put you to sleep. But I would still do it because I had that vision. The second thing I did was I tied emotion to that vision. So I created my vision, and then I tied emotion to it through connecting it to my why. And my why was I was doing it for my family, for the financial stability of my family. Firemen work a lot of overtime so that they could pay their bills. If I could get promoted, I wouldn't have to work as much overtime because with the promotion came a pay grade, right? A pay increase. So I would be making about what a fireman would make if he was working all of that overtime. So I used to go to work and actually think about, all right, like I'm a fireman on overtime. I don't have to work as much overtime. I'm not forced into working overtime because I'm already a fireman on overtime. Sure, I had to take on additional responsibility, and my head was always on the chopping block, and I had to be the answer man. But with that responsibility came freedom, my financial freedom. The third thing, and I didn't really do this as studying for a lieutenant, but the third thing that I do now, much more now, is I use Post-its. And I write reminders on Post-its. If I'm looking to build a discipline in relationships, let's say, reaching out to brokers to buy. I did this when I had to reach out to brokers. I didn't really like reaching out to brokers in the beginning. So I would write on Post-its brokers and put them all over the house. And it would remind me that, yeah, I have to take this action. If everywhere I look it says brokers, and I don't want it to say, like, I don't want to see that all over the place, then I have to be able to crumble them up and throw them out. And for me to be able to crumble them up and throw them out, I have to actually have the discipline of calling brokers. So I put reminders everywhere. And the fourth one, and this is really good, this ties in accountability, it ties in a little bit of pressure. Pressure makes diamonds, right? Is I told everybody. So everybody knew that I was going to become a lieutenant. That did a couple of different things. One, it told my friends why I essentially was saying no to going out with them. You want to go to the ball game? No, I got to study. Because they knew that I had a goal. They knew I had an objective. I wasn't just blowing them off. So when I told everybody, it did that. It also created a little bit of pressure on me because now I told people I'm going to become a lieutenant. So what happens if I don't become a lieutenant? So now I have to put the time in. I have to have that discipline. So we created that pressure. And pressure makes diamonds. And I can tell you that's another one of my favorite sayings, pressure makes diamonds, because it really is true. When you're in an environment with the right people and the right pressures being applied, it's amazing what you can do. So telling people that. And then the third thing telling people does is it brings that accountability in because people are asking all the time, how's that going? When I was a fireman, guys would ask me, how's the studying going? The bosses would actually pick me out and show me different things. They would show me how where the fire started, how the fire moved. They would show me specific things to what the books say. The books would say, this is what a brownstone looks like, right? And the brownstone has multiple floors, and the floors have specific names. It's not 1, 2, and 3, right? Basement, cellar, parlor, dead man's room, so that they would show me what the dead man's room is. And they would relate the buildings to the books so that I would be able to have a greater understanding of it. So telling people got them on board with me and it helped. It gave them the knowledge so that they could help lift me up and propel me to my success. I want to leave you with two questions. I was thinking about how I can add a little bit more value to you, and these are two questions I'd like you to contemplate in areas that you want to develop your discipline in. So if you're not successful as you'd like to be, why aren't you as successful as you'd like to be? And what's one behavior you could begin right now that in doing so will lead you towards that success? What are those tiny steps that you could start taking to lead you to your success? And what's one skill you could develop in order for you to move the needle towards realizing your success? What's that skill? If you want to achieve big things, you have to do things differently. In order to do things differently, you have to build your skill set. So what's the one skill that you're going to commit to working on a little bit every day? Remember the 100-hour rule. 100 hours, 18 minutes a day. If you work on something 18 minutes a day, you're better than like 95% of the population. So what's that one skill that you're going to build? One last thing I want to close out with is a quote from Abraham Lincoln. I want you to remember this quote. When you start feeling that urge to eat dessert, I want you to think about this. Lincoln says, discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. Guys, we live up here in the numerator, not down here in the denominator. Go out there today and be unstoppable and absolutely crush your life. Love spending time with you.